What's going on, everyone? Hopefully, you're doing well. Hopefully, you had a good vacation. I'm recording this the day before we go to vacation, so that Friday. But this is our first day reading The Gingerbread Girl by Stephen King. If this is your first Stephen King anything, hopefully you'll like it. It starts off a little slow. We need to get a little exposition out of the way. If you remember, exposition is everything that happened in the story, like before we met the character. So a huge event, horrible event, happens between M. She's our female protagonist. We haven't had a lot of male protagonists this year when we did our reading. I don't know why that is. It's not like I go out of my way to pick just female protagonists and not male protagonists, but we have another main character who identifies as female. If we do read Bang, I think that's Sawyer, so he'll be one of our first guys. We might have had a couple other ones earlier, but so another female protagonist. We'll meet the antagonist a little later, not today. He's male, but it's about a woman whose name is Emily. She's called M for short. And before we meet her, she's had this horrific, one of the worst, probably the worst, everything that could happen to a parent, and she loses a child. She loses this child from probably something called SIDS. I don't know if they ever go into it, and if you're not familiar with what SIDS is, it stands for Sudden Infant Death Syndrome. One of the worst things a parent can experience. Basically, you have this healthy baby, couple months old, and just one morning it doesn't wake up. Like, gotta be crushing. Like, there's no signs that things are going wrong except when you go into the crib and the baby's dead. So we start off with that, like absolutely horrific. And this is going to damage the marriage of M and her husband. And that's going to lead to other things going on, which I don't want to get into quite yet. There might be a couple pages, like I have to block out some things because, I mean, it's Stephen King and it can get pretty violent. So we won't get into, it's just a couple paragraphs here and there, I think. Of course, there's probably going to be some swearing because that's how like normal people talk when they're enraged. I will not read those words, of course, just like with, what's the word? What's the book we just read? Crash? Yeah, Crash. Just like Crash. All right, enough talking. It's about 3 minutes of introduction. And today we got to get to know the situation. Lots of exposition. Okay. So if by the end of today you're like, ugh, I don't know about this short story, give it another day. It will get good. It will get very good. It will get, I hope. They haven't made this into a movie. Nobody's made this into a movie. They should. All right, here we go. Oh, one last thing. Gingerbread Girl is what it's called. And if you ever have heard of that like old fairy tale, like the gingerbread man, it's like run as fast as you can. You can't catch me, the gingerbread man. So she is going to start out by running to cope with the death of her daughter. Like, some people might cope with it through alcohol or whatever, drugs. She does it in a healthy way, running. You think that's pretty, excuse me, you think that's pretty healthy, right? But take anything in this world, even if it's like the best thing in the world, maybe love, right? Maybe love, to be loved. Take anything in this world, too much of it, always a bad thing. Because love, let's take that. Well, if you love somebody too much and then you're like obsessed with them, then it's like stalker territory. We don't have stalkers in this book, but just the running, it sounds good at first, but it can be bad. All right, here we go. Number 1. It's just kind of like chapter 1 right here. Only fast running would do. After the baby died, Emily took up running. At first, it was just down to the end of the driveway where she would stand bent over with her hands clutching her legs just above the knees. Then to the end of the block. Then all the way to Koozy's Quick Pick, the bottom of the hill. So Koozy's Quick Pick, probably a little convenience store, right? Top of the next column. There she would pick up bread or margarine, maybe a ho-ho or a ring ding, if she could think of nothing else. At first, she only walked back, but later, she ran that way too. Eventually, she gave up the snack foods. It was surprisingly hard to do. She hadn't realized that sugar eased grief, or maybe the snacks had become a fetish. Either way, in the end, the ho-hos had to go, and did. Running was enough. Henry called the running a fetish, and she supposed he was right. So a fetish is like, it's kind of like what we were talking about before. Um, and it's always going to give us some definition that really doesn't help. But a fetish is basically something that like you like a little bit too much and it becomes unhealthy. So the running for her, it was like an unhealthy love of something. A fetish. There we go. What does Susan Steiner say about it? He asked. Sorry. We'll find out. Let me start that over. What does Dr. Steiner say about it? He asked. Dr. Steiner says, run your ass off. Get those endorphins going. She hadn't mentioned the running to Susan Steiner. Hadn't even seen her since Amy's funeral. She says she'll put it on a prescription pad if you want. So Susan Steiner would be her probably like a therapist. Emily had always been able to bluff Henry. Even after Amy died, we can have another one, she had said, sitting beside him on the bed as he lay there with his ankles crossed and tears streaming down the sides of his face. It eased him, and that was good, but there was never going to be another baby. With the attendant risk of finding said infant gray and still in its crib. Never again the fruitless, it's a good word to know, fruitless, meaning no matter what you do, it's not going to work. Fruitless, as we get into the fourth quarter, maybe if you haven't done any work all year, you're probably not listening to this, but if you haven't done any work all year and you failed, like to try to start doing actual work in class in the fourth quarter would probably be fruitless. I mean, you're going to fail anyway. So fruitless, it means you can try, but it does no good. And they were talking about CPR with a baby, which is just really sad. Fruitless CPR. Hang on. Why did it do that? Fruitless CPR or the screaming 911 call with the operator saying, lower your voice, ma'am. I can't understand you. But Henry didn't need to know that. And she was willing to comfort him, at least at the start. So maybe a little foreshadowing there. Their marriage might be in a little bit of trouble. She believed that comfort, not bread, was the staff of life. Maybe eventually she would be able to find some for herself. So find some comfort. She's not finding any comfort right now. In the meantime, she had produced a defective baby. That was the point. Top of the next column. She would not risk another. Then she started getting headaches, real blinders. So she did go to a doctor, but it was Dr. Mendez, their general practitioner, not Susan Steiner. Mendez gave her a prescription for some stuff called Zomig. She took the bus to the family practice where Zomig hung out, then ran to the drugstore to get the script filled. After that, she jogged home. It was 2 miles. And by the time she got there, she had what felt like a steel fork planted high up in her side. All right, let's stop here for a second and admire what Stephen King did there. Again, I don't know if I mentioned it, but like my favorite writer by far. When I was in a sophomore in high school, I don't know how I got the book, The Stand. I think it's like his fourth book or whatever, but like I got addicted to that book. I read it cover to cover. Big book. I think I read it in like a month or so. It's not like I'm a really fast reader, but I read that thing. One of the first books I had finished since like kindergarten. So I think he does like so many things well. And if you look at that last highlighted thing, she had what felt like a steel fork planted high up in her side. Now we call that simile. Simile, comparing two things using like or as. And when authors do this, it really helps the reader connect with something they already know. So maybe you have been running so much that you feel like we might call it a stitch somewhere in your rib cage. And with just in case somebody hadn't run before and felt that, everybody can imagine, I'm sure they've eaten with a fork, I would think. at least in this country, right? So what felt like a steel fork planted high up in her side is connecting something that is known with something that might not be known, and we call that a simile, which you probably know, but it's such a good use of that. Between the top of her ribs and her armpit. She didn't let it concern her. That pain would go away. Besides, she was exhausted and felt like she could sleep for a while. Okay, little inference right there. Talking about that. I'll just pause this and ask anyone, okay, does that mean anything to you? Is there like something that's not said on the page, an inference there? I think there is. Right, back to this. She did all afternoon on the same bed where Amy had been made and Henry had cried. When she woke up, she could see ghostly circles floating in the air, a sure sign that she was getting one of what she liked to call M's famous headaches. She took one of her new pills, and to her surprise, almost shock, the headache turned tail and slunk away. All right, got some more. English teachers love to talk about this stuff. Figurative language. That right there is personification. You are giving something that's not a person the qualities of a person. So you have that headache. It turned tail and slunk away. Maybe like a dog would do. If you have a dog, maybe like a dog. So I'm using a simile here. Maybe like a dog would do when it's in trouble, turns tail and slinks away. So that's what her headache did because of the zomake. Anyway, first to the back of her head, then gone. She thought there ought to be a pill like that for the death of a child. She thought she needed to explore the limits of her endurance. She suspected the exploration would be a long one. So she's going to try to, I guess, punish herself with the running, it seems like. There was a JUCO, junior college. There was a JUCO with a cinder track not too far from the house. She began to drive over there in the early mornings, just after Henry left for work. Henry didn't understand the running. Jogging, sure. Lots of women jogged. Keep those extra 4 pounds off the old fanny. Keep those extra 2 inches off the old waistline. But Em didn't have an extra 4 pounds on her backside, and besides, jogging was no longer enough. She had to run, and fast. Only fast running would do. She parked at the track and ran until she could run no more, until her sleeveless FSU sweatshirt was dark with sweat down the front and back, and she was shambling. Great verb right there, shambling, almost like I think zombies, the way zombies would walk, shambling, sometimes puking with exhaustion. FSU, that is, maybe somebody knows. What is FSU? FSU sweatshirt? It is Florida State University, the Seminoles. So, yeah, running is healthy, right? Jogging, running is healthy, but so much so that you puke? Nah, probably not. She might have a problem. Henry found out. Someone saw her there, running all by herself at 8 in the morning, and told him. They had a discussion about it. The discussion escalated into a marriage-ending argument. It's a hobby, she said. Jody Anderson said you ran until you fell down. She was afraid you'd had a heart attack. That's not a hobby, Em, not even a fetish. It's an obsession. And he looked at her reproachfully. So that's like getting someone in trouble, like making them feel shame. I can't bring up the definition right here. Expressing disapproval or disappointment. She gave him a reproachful look. So if somebody is mad at you, they might give you a reproachful look. It would be a little while yet before she picked up the book and threw it at him, but that was what really tore it, that reproachful look. She could no longer stand it. Given his rather long face, it was like having a sheep in the house. I married a Dorset Gray, she thought. And now it's just bye, bye, bye all day long. But she tried one more time to be reasonable about something she knew in her heart had no reasonable core. There was magical thinking. There was also magical doing. Running, for instance. Marathoners run until they fall down, she said. You planning to run in a marathon? Maybe. But she looked away. Out the window at the driveway. The driveway called her. The driveway led to the sidewalk, and the sidewalk led to the world. No, he said. You're not going to run in a marathon. You have no plans to run in a marathon. It occurred to her with that sense of brilliant revelation the obvious can bring that this was the essence of Henry, the blanking apotheosis of Henry, like the what he is to the core right there. During the 6 years of their marriage, he'd always been perfectly aware of what she was thinking, feeling, planning. So that happens when you know someone so well. I comforted you, she thought. Not furious yet, but beginning to be furious. You lay there on the bed leaking, and I comforted you. Leaking, another way to just say like bawling, crying. So now he is going to, I don't know what his profession is, but he might be like a psychologist or something, because he's going to go into a lot of like what's going on in her brain. And I'm pretty sure she doesn't want to hear that. The running is a classic psychological response to the pain you feel, he was saying in that same earnest way. It's called avoidance. But honey, if you don't feel your pain, you'll never be able to. That's when she grabbed the nearest object at hand, which happened to be a paperback copy of The Memory Keeper's Daughter. This was a book she had tried and rejected, but Henry had picked it up and was now about 3/4 of the way through, judging by the bookmark. He even has the reading tastes of a Dorset Gray, she thought, and hucked it at him. Struck him on the shoulder. He stared at her, wide, shocked eyes, then grabbed at her, probably just to hug her, but who knew? Who really knew anything? Well, probably not going to hit her, M said, but who knew? Who knew? If he had grabbed a moment earlier, he might have caught her by the arm or the wrist or maybe just the back of the t-shirt. But that moment of shock undid him. He missed. She was running, slowing only to snatch her fanny pack off the table by the front door, down the driveway to the sidewalk, then down the hill where she had briefly pushed a pram with other mothers who now shunned her. Not sure why Stephen King, I don't know what that is. I'm not sure why Stephen King, an American, would use a British term, but this is what the British call like a stroller for babies, a stroller, carriage, something like that. This time she had no intention of stopping or even slowing. Dressed only in shorts, sneakers, and a t-shirt reading "Save the Cheerleader," Emily ran out into the world. She put her fanny pack around her waist and snapped the catch as she pelted down the hill. And the feeling? Exhilaration. Pure pow. She ran downtown 2 miles, 22 minutes, not even stopping when the light was against her. When that happened, she jogged in place. A couple boys in a top-down Mustang. It was just getting to be top-down weather. Passed her at the corner of Main and Eastern. One whistled. Em gave him the finger. He laughed and applauded as the Mustang accelerated down Main. She didn't have much cash, but she had a pair of credit cards. The American Express was the prize because with it, she could get traveler's checks. She realized she wasn't going home, not for a while. And when the realization caused a feeling of relief, maybe even fugitive excitement. What are fugitives? We'll stop right there. Fugitives. Fugitive is somebody who is running away from the police. Instead of sorrow, she suspected this was not a temporary thing. Maybe she would be leaving Henry permanently. She went into the Morris Hotel to use the phone, then decided on the spur of the moment to take a room. Did they have anything for just one night? They did. She gave the desk clerk her Amex, short for American Express. Her Amex card. Doesn't look like you'll need a bellman, the clerk said, taking in her shorts and t-shirt, so she didn't have any luggage. I left in a hurry. I see. Spoken in a tone of voice that said he didn't see it all. She took the key he slid to her, hurried across the wide lobby to the elevators, restraining the urge to run. All right. Part 2 we will get to tomorrow, but you sound like you might be crying. Yeah, so after this, so we had to set up some things. We had to set up the exposition, get all of that out of the way so we can get up to the conflict. I mean, right now, there's a conflict for sure. There's a conflict. We can stop and discuss that conflict now. But yeah, there definitely is a conflict. A couple, I think, going on. at least two. So one thing we'll find out about M, it doesn't seem like she has a job. So she doesn't have any money of her own. It sounds like that she was going to be a stay-at-home mom. That was going to be her job. And now without a baby, I mean, unfortunately, of course, there is no job for her. So she doesn't have any money of her own. She's going to have to ask Henry kind of awkwardly for some money. And luckily, she has a dad who's going to come to the rescue. But and then she's going to go stay in his place, like his little home in Florida. And that's where things take a turn for the worse. All right. Hope you're enjoying it so far. Starts off a little slow. It will get better.